You're the one that I've been searching for.
Revenge on Umbrella.
It was revealed that an insidious force known simply as the Connections was operating from the shadows and also played a key role in the incident. To this day, little is known about the Connections.
Today, I'll be revisiting the Brandon Bailey theory. Brandon Bailey has once again become a talking point as a potential villain for Resident Evil 9. I will lay out all of the evidence to support this, including clues, his potential motives, and end goal. If this theory doesn't turn out to be correct, it's still fine because to me, these are fun and they're for entertainment until the game actually comes out. Also, I know the developers have said that Resident Evil 9 is not a follow-up to Resident Evil 7 and 8, as those two are their own little series. He also referred to Chris going to the BSAA won't be explored in Requiem, but Brandon might still show up, as he's never actually been in a Resident Evil game. He only exists within the lore that dates back to the creation of Umbrella. To understand this theory, you need to know Brandon Bailey's story, so I included his lore at the top of this video, but if you already know it, you can skip to this timestamp. But let's get right into the video. Nobody knows exactly when Brandon was born. He studied viruses at a university in Switzerland in the 60s with Dr. Marcus, who was his teacher and later his friend. Marcus was part of a secret group of powerful people who also studied biology and eugenics. Thanks to Marcus, Bailey joined this group. Its members were James Marcus, Oswald Spencer, and Edward Ashford, alongside a few other people. In 1966, Bailey, Marcus, and Spencer went on a trip to Africa. They were looking for a special plant. They thought this plant had a special property that can produce a virus that could be used for eugenics. After 3 months of research and under constant threat of some of the locals, they found the plant that produced the virus and named it Progenitor. They went back to Europe with samples of this virus. When they returned, things changed very quickly, as Dr. Marcus was accused of lying about his research and was kicked out of the university. This forced the group to move their work to Spencer's lab at his home. Through research, they discovered the Progenitor virus could fix damaged cells, but they needed to find out how to make the plant produce more of the virus within it at a faster rate. But money started to become an issue. Seeing an opportunity, Spencer proposed they start a company to get more money for their research, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. The others agreed, and in 1967, Umbrella was born.
Umbrella?
What? What was Umbrella doing?
The group split up the virus samples to work on them separately. Bailey worked with Marcus. Research was slow for Bailey and Marcus, and in 1968, Spencer suggested that the two of them go back to Africa for the plant, as a larger sample could make their work go a lot faster. Brandon and Marcus decided to go to Africa, but they had to prepare the site first, because the first time the three of them went to Africa for the plant, they ran into a lot of trouble with the local tribe. They knew the tribe weren't just going to let them have the plant and take control of the area. Marcus and Brandon hired soldiers overseas to take control of the plant. In about a month, they learned the soldiers were successful, and Brandon alone left for Africa. Yes, Marcus didn't go with him because Spencer had arranged for Marcus to teach at a school in the United States, a trick to separate Bailey and Marcus to take more power for himself. In Africa, Bailey looked over the creation of the lab in the caverns. The lab was designed to get progenitor samples a lot faster and send them over to Umbrella. Without Marcus, Brandon had no distractions and became obsessed with his work. Brandon focused on finding the right conditions to make the virus. He also regained communication with Marcus, who was working on a separate project called the T-Virus. In the late 1980s, after 20 years of work, Brandon finally figured out how to make the virus at a decent rate. Around the same time, he was told Marcus had died. Spencer was the one that killed him, but at the time, Bailey didn't know that. This news deeply saddened Brandon, and he fell into a deep depression. Marcus taught him everything he knew, brought him into the fold, and now, thanks to Spencer, not only did he separate the pair for 20 years, but killed one of them. Spencer also removed and erased Brandon's name from Umbrella's history, destroying Brandon's legacy. Around this time, he probably figured out what Spencer had done. By the time the lab was ordered to close in 1998, Bailey was a lost man that no longer cared about his own life's work. 20 years of his life dedicated to this no longer mattered, and he wasn't going to get any credit for it at all. Despite his sadness though, Bailey didn't go home. He used his old contacts to create a new organization, the Connections, a group in Germany that was against Umbrella. He stopped caring about eugenics and turned this group into a criminal organization that sold bioweapons. Spencer put a hit out on everyone who worked on the African lab to protect the secret of the progenitor virus. Albert Wesker later in 2006 started to look for survivors in that African base. He didn't find Brandon, and in Wesker's list you can find in Resident Evil 5, he put Brandon Bailey as deceased because nobody could find him, and to say that he's deceased is a justified assumption. However, as of 2017, after the events of Resident Evil 7, the BSAA tried to track down the Connections group. They discovered Brandon Bailey was the founder of this criminal organization. Although they didn't find the group, they weren't sure if Bailey was dead or alive. Now that you know everything about Brandon Bailey and his story, let's go ahead and talk about the pre-order trailer and look at some clues that might hint that the Connections or Brandon Bailey might play a role in Resident Evil 9. First off, in the gameplay itself, we got a better look at this person compared to the very first time we saw them. It seems that this person is elderly and his body is kind of messed up, and he has a hole in his chest that's being covered up by a scar, which reminds me of Oswald Spencer. However, in Heisenberg's wall in Resident Evil 8, you can see a mysterious figure that actually never showed up in Resident Evil 8. This is what the person looks like, and people have noticed that it has a striking resemblance to this character in Resident Evil 9. Again, this person has never been identified at all, and people have claimed that he even looks like an older Albert Wesker. And this isn't Heisenberg himself either, it's just a mysterious figure. If this is Brandon Bailey, then it would make sense why he would be on Heisenberg's wall. Because the Connections and Mother Miranda had a very deep relationship, creating the Eveline virus in Resident Evil 7. This is by far the biggest clue that Brandon might be involved. The way that Capcom mentioned the Connections next is also a big hint. Now, the way that they mention the Connections seems pretty sus to a lot of people. They only briefly talked about them, but they made it seem like we're gonna find out more in the future.
Separately, it was revealed that an insidious force known simply as the Connections was operating from the shadows and also played a key role in the incident. To this day, little is known about the Connections.
Are you taking the way that they mentioned the Connections as some kind of hint that they're going to expand on them in the future through Brandon Bailey and whatever he has planned? Speaking of the Connections group, an interesting theory has popped up within the Resident Evil community. Here is a photo of the Connection organization members. You can find this photo in Resident Evil 7. Most of these people are already identified. However, there is one person that has yet to be identified. People have noticed that this person might be Nathan. Yes, Grace's boss at the FBI in Resident Evil 9. If Nathan is truly a part of the Connections group, then it makes sense why he chose Grace specifically to go to the hotel where the person in the chair was already waiting for Grace. Grace has experienced a great deal of trauma, but why would he choose her of all people to go back there? This makes perfect sense. It suggests that Nathan is a double agent working for the FBI as well as Brandon Bailey. This also gives Brandon Bailey connections within the FBI himself, which allows him to remain hidden all of these years. There is another thing we have to talk about. We do know that Brandon was with the original founders of Umbrella when they discovered Progenitor. He was right there next to Edward, Oswald, and James Marcus. Resident Evil 5 gave the excuse that the reason Brandon wasn't mentioned before that is because Spencer erased Brandon Bailey's name from the legacy and history books of Umbrella, so that's why he was never mentioned before. This is all something that Capcom themselves set up with their storytelling. However, in the pre-order trailer, when she was discussing the original founders of Umbrella, she conveniently left out the name Brandon Bailey. Perhaps if Capcom straight up mentioned his name and acknowledged the name, then that would be a huge hint and possibly a spoiler, so they intentionally left it out. Now that we got various hints and clues out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about his motivation. The question is, if Brandon will be in the game, then why? Why restart and rebuild Umbrella of all things? And I think that the answer is very simple, but to truly understand his motivations and what I'm going to talk about, you have to understand his feelings for James Marcus, the creator of the T-Virus.
I've spent every waking moment researching and extracting the progenitor virus. Everything I did was for Dr. Marcus. Actually, when I think about it, I probably stopped caring the day I heard he had died all those years ago. I didn't feel angry or happy or even shocked. I felt nothing at all. It was as if all my emotions just shut down. I just kept sending out samples of the progenitor virus to all of Umbrella's laboratories. I was just an automated machine reporting to Umbrella's headquarters every time one of my subordinates made a breakthrough or discovered something new. I was like a zombie, ambling through life. No thoughts, no feelings. And now, the research center where I've spent half my life is closed. I really don't care one way or another. It's probably all for the best. Perhaps it's too late to have any semblance of a life again.
As you heard, Brandon really admired James Marcus, dedicating 20 years of his work to and for him. And that kind of makes sense. Marcus taught Brandon everything he knew, breaking him into the group, letting his scientific mind develop. And to Brandon, that probably meant everything. Spencer ordered Marcus's death, abandoned Brandon in Africa, and put a hit out on him as well. Also, erasing Brandon's name from the records would completely destroy Brandon's legacy, as if he never existed. Could this be the reason Brandon would want to restart Umbrella? Perhaps all of his work with the Connections, creating and selling bioweapons, gaining money and funds, was all to recreate Umbrella. Did Brandon do all of this to take back the organization that they were both exiled from, that they both gave everything to make Umbrella bigger and better? Could this be the connection to Umbrella? With this theory in mind, certain things and questions start to make sense, such as, why are zombies in Resident Evil 9? Well, Brandon Bailey is using James Marcus's research for his own goals. James created the T-Virus, so perhaps Brandon Bailey, using today's technology, modified the T-Virus. Why do some enemies react to light in a negative way? Well, in Resident Evil 0, we learned that James Marcus created the Queen Leech. And do you know what the Queen Leech's weakness really was? light itself, matching the hooded figure's reaction when light touches his skin, which matches the big mama stalker enemy that's hunting down Grace. It all keeps coming back to James Marcus. Why does this new Umbrella want Grace and want to extract her blood, as we already saw? If Daylight is really mutating inside of Grace and has become something different, then Brandon, who worked on the progenitor for 20 years, knows everything about the T-virus at this point, could be qualified to use the vaccine that's transformed inside of Grace. And this would actually match something we've already seen in Resident Evil 5, again, the game that Brandon was first introduced. Wesker used the T-virus vaccine inside of Jill to create the Ouroboros. So perhaps we're seeing something similar, that Brandon wants something inside of Grace's blood. That's why he was extracting it. But going back to Alyssa, why were they so concerned about her as if they launched a whole operation to kill her? Well, Alyssa wrote an article called "What is a BOW?" after she escaped Raccoon City, and this article put Umbrella in a terrible situation, and the impact of this article was massive. The first domino to fall that would lead to legal proceedings against Umbrella called the Raccoon Trials. The Raccoon Trials made Umbrella go completely bankrupt, and when they lost the case, thanks to Albert Wesker of all people, they completely shut down, and this was the first nail in the coffin. So of course, Alyssa snooping around now with this new Umbrella, they probably thought, we have to take her out because history is just going to repeat itself, and we're not gonna make Spencer's mistake. Now, I have one more big thing here I want to do. The difference between me and other content creators is that I really go above and beyond when it comes to theories because I love talking about it, as you can probably hear from the sound of my voice. So I set up a special presentation for you to listen to that will completely sum up my theory.
Good evening, Ms. Ashcroft. I'm here to explain a few things. Who I am and why you're here. You see, I was once part of a group of ambitious individuals. Spencer, Ashford, Marcus, a few others. Some wanted to become a god, some were more concerned with their legacy. I too had my own ambitions. Now, Spencer, Marcus, Ashford are all dead. I am all that's left. Spencer took everything, wanted power for himself. All of these years later, it still angers me to my bones. I finally created the connections, free to pursue my old goals, but my body was wearing down on me. Age made it difficult. I used the mold as a tool to gain powers and to keep me going, and that's where I learned of your mother. I ripped the Daylight vaccine out from her body, drained her corpse, mixed her blood with the mold, and finally got my youth back. It worked for nearly a decade, 8 years. I realized, Ms. Ashcroft, I needed a stronger version of Daylight. I needed a more permanent solution. I needed you. Special one. Chosen one, Ms. Ashcroft. Now I will take every drop of blood in you and mix it with what's left of the progenitor and the mold. I will be made whole again. Spencer wanted to be a god. Now I finally have the means to surpass him and his precious Umbrella. Marcus, teacher, do you hear me? I will grow bigger than Umbrella ever dreamed to be. Ms. Ashcroft, I don't need you to understand me, but I need you to understand I will stop at nothing to get what I want. Goodbye, Ms. Ashcroft, and thank you.
I hope you all enjoyed, and thank you so fucking much for watching this video, and remember to hit the like button. As you can see, a lot of effort went into making this video, almost 20 minutes, so I appreciate any type of support. The hype feature is there as well. I really do appreciate it. I'm gonna be out here. Thank you guys and girls for listening. Deuces.